Hey guys, Vladimir here with Desktop Makes. This video is going to be a little bit different. I received several requests on putting together a video showing my CR-10 setup. So I actually took the whole thing apart, put it back together so I can show you, which is really not as involved as it sounds, and you'll see. So I'm going to go over assembly and also my slicer settings for it. And two slicer software I'm going to review. One is Cura by Ultimaker and the other one is Simplify 3D. Alright, let's begin. Assembly of the printer is pretty straightforward and mainly consists of attaching the two pieces of frame together and plugging in some cables. As you can see here, I have the two pieces laid on its side with the help of some old geology textbooks. And what I did here was make sure to line up the holes because I'm going to come in with these M5 screws along with the provided Allen wrench to just get those in place and tighten them. You do want to make sure that they are all the way through and rest inside the channel of these aluminum extrusions. Now, one thing I did different with my printer is that I relocated these rubber feet from here to here so that it fit better on my workbench. Next, we'll attach the brackets to the left and right side of the printer, but be careful here because on the left side, we also will be attaching the Z limit switch. And I say left side as if you're standing in front of the printer looking at it. These go on with the provided T-slot nuts and bolts, and use the smaller Allen wrench to get these on. We'll do the same thing on the right side of the printer, except this time we're only attaching the bracket with no limit switch. Notice that I installed the T-slot nuts with the bolts through the bracket first. I line them up and then screw them to tighten them in place. Attach the two cables to the power supply. These can only go in one way and they're not interchangeable, so it's pretty hard to mess this part up. You can tell which connector goes where by just looking at the connector and the port. We also need to connect the cables to the motors and limit switches. Now this is also straightforward because they are all labeled as X, Y, and Z. Here's a diagram showing the position of each motor and limit switch. Just remember that on the CR-10S you do have two Z motors, one on each side. The CR-10S comes with a filament sensor that pauses your print if you ever run out of filament, so attach that if you have the S model. We'll now attach our Bowden tubing, and you'll want to press that little white piece in to allow the tubing to fit in all the way. The filament holder will go right on top of the power supply with these provided screws, and the glass build plate will attach to the bed with these binder clips. Before turning on the printer, you want to make sure to select the correct operating voltage on the power supply. We're now ready to extrude some filament, so we'll turn on our printer and use our menu screen to navigate to our nozzle temperature. I'm going to turn that up to 215 degrees since I'll be extruding PLA. If you have the S model of the printer, you'll want to guide your filament through the filament sensor first before going through the extruder and then all the way through the Bowden tubing. Keep pushing the filament through, and this is what initial success looks like. You'll want to make sure you get your filament completely flowing out of the nozzle. The last step we need to do before we can start 3D printing is to level our bed. So use the screen navigation to go to bed leveling and click on next step. This initiates the bed leveling procedure by first homing the print head and then sending the nozzle to several different locations along the print bed, allowing us to change the height of the bed by tweaking the thumb screws located at the bottom. You'll want to use a regular sheet of printer paper as a feeler gauge on each position, and what you're looking for is just a slight friction fit between the bed and the nozzle. So move the paper back and forth and adjust the thumb screws to give you the right height. You'll turn the thumb screws to the right to raise the bed, and you'll turn it to the left to lower the bed. So make your adjustments, and they're going to be just really fine adjustments. We're talking quarter of turns to get just that right bit of friction. Now this part is crucial. If you want to get some really good prints, you really have to take your time with this procedure. Okay, now that I've assembled the printer and leveled the bed, I want to talk a little bit about slicers and slicer settings. And I'm just going to limit this to two different slicers because there's a whole bunch out there. The first is going to be Cura by Ultimaker, and the second one is Simplify 3D. So let's begin with Cura. And the beautiful thing about Cura is that it's absolutely free. So all you have to do is go to Ultimaker's website, ultimaker.com, navigate to software, and download for free. Notice that I am using version 3.2. So after downloading it, I'm going to just open it up. And the first thing we need to do is bring in our printer profile, and you'll see that I've already done that because it says so right here, the Creality CR10. The beautiful thing about this version of Cura, which is the latest version, is that the profiles are built into the software, so it makes the job really easy. All you have to do is go to Settings, down to Printer, and then down to Add Printer. You'll next go to Other, so just expand that little arrow, and you'll see a bunch of printers listed by alphabetical order. All you have to do is just navigate down to Creality's printers, and you'll see the CR10, CR10S4, and the CR10S5. Now the S4 and the S5 are just the 400 by 400 build plate, or the S5 being the 500 by 500. The regular CR10 and the CR10S are both 300 by 300, so I'm going to click on that and go to Add Printer. So I've already have mine, or I've already brought it in, so I'm just going to close out of here. Next, we'll bring in our model, and a model that I like to use for quickly testing out my print settings is just this Maker Faire robot. So I'm here at Thingiverse, and you can just type Maker Faire robot, it'll pop up. And if you recall, when Make Magazine did their initial round of 3D printer shootouts, they actually used this model, and I've been using it since, just because it's really quick print. It prints in like 20 something minutes, and you can very quickly see what needs to be adjusted in your printer. So I always go ahead and grab the one with the little hands up. So if you just go to Think Files, it's this one right here. I've already brought that in, so let's go back to Cura, and I'm going to go to Open File, go to my Downloads folder, and just double click on that. It'll bring it in and throw it on my bed. So now let's talk about settings. If we look at the right hand side here, we'll notice that we have two different options for choosing our print settings. There's a recommended, and then there's a custom. We'll begin with the recommended, and that's sort of your quick print or your easy version. And it's very limited, but it may be just what you want to begin with if you're just getting started. So notice here we have our layer height, and we can drag this little dot up or down to choose our layer height. And then we have our infill here that we can drag as well. And we have the option to enable gradual infill, generate support, and if we want build plate adhesion. Next, we'll go into our custom, and so that's what I'm really going to use here and show you what I tweaked and what I left the same. Within our custom, honestly, I left most stuff the same. There's only a couple things I tweaked here. So we'll start at the top. I'm going to drag this up. Layer height, I like printing at 0.2. Now, Ultimaker calls it the draft quality. I would say it's sort of standard quality. You know, they have fine as 0.1 and then low as 0.15. So I think that's a little too high for starting out, or if you just want regular good quality. So 0.2 is what I stick with. And shell, I'm going to leave this the same, 0.8 and 0.6. Infill, 10 to 20% is where I tend to be with for, I'd say, 90% of my prints. Now, what I am going to change is going to be here with print temperature. So we see that the temperature, and we're working with PLA here, is set to 200 degrees as default, which is fine, but I like the first layer to be a little bit higher just to guarantee me that nice adhesion. So what I'm going to do is add it in. Now, I don't see it here. It just says print temperature. There's no option for initial print temperature. Nice thing with Ultimaker is if you just hover over here where it says material, you get this little gear. Click on that and you get a whole bunch of other options. Now you can see that it says setting visibility, so you can add these to your default options if you want, or uncheck them if you don't want them there. So this is something that I want, and it's going to be print temperature or printing temperature initial layer. So if I just check that, it automatically pops up here. So I'm going to close this, and I can see I have another option here for printing temperature initial layer. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that and change that to 210 degrees. So that's there now, and that'll stay there. So that's the nice thing about this setup, is you can make this as complex or as simple as you want it. So next, the build plate temperature, I find 40 degrees Celsius a little low, so I'm going to change that to 60 degrees Celsius. And 60 degree along with a first layer of 210 I think is a good sweet spot for getting a good adhesion on that build plate. All right, everything else, let's see, I'm gonna leave the same. When it comes down to build plate adhesion, I have the option between a skirt, brim, raft, or none. I'm gonna choose skirt, and I found that the default is it'll do 4 circles around your print, and that's what skirt is. It just kind of is a way to just clean your nozzle out. It'll do just sort of a circle around your print before it starts printing. But notice here, again, it doesn't give me an option to change how many revolutions it's going to do. If I click on this little gear, and it'll say build plate adhesion here, and if I go down I see an option for skirt line count. I'm going to click on that, click close, and you'll see here it brought it in as 4. I have that new line, skirt line count. I'm going to change that to 2. And so what that's going to do is just before it starts printing my model, it'll just do 2 layers of, well, not 2 layers, it'll actually do 1 layer but twice revolution around my model before it actually starts printing. And again, that just gives it a chance to kind of purge the nozzle and clean it up a little bit. And that's really the only thing I'm going to change. I got a lot of comments on how good my prints look with this printer, but honestly I've just really been using the default settings. I don't really have a secret recipe here. Once I'm happy with my settings, I'm simply going to go to save to file, and it'll automatically get saved to my SD card if I have it in, and then you have the option to eject it. So let's go ahead and take that to the printer now. Okay, next let's talk about Simplify 3D, and we'll do the exact same thing we did with Cura, except we'll use Simplify 3D. And you'll see that once you kind of have an understanding of how a slicer works, you can transfer that knowledge from one to another. And really the only thing you kind of have to figure out is where the buttons or where to find the specific settings, but the idea is basically the same. Now, Simplify 3D is a paid software. You do have to buy it. If you go to simplify3d.com, go to buy now, you'll see it is $149. It is a one-time fee, so none of that subscription stuff. But you'll notice that it does have a good following. Scroll down on the homepage and you'll see some 3D printing all-stars here. Noah and Pedro from Adafruit, great 3D printing channel, by the way. You've got Joel, a 3D printing nerd. You know, a lot of people here who use it who kind of tell you, hey, maybe there is something to this $149 slicer. So let's go ahead. Well, I've already downloaded it and installed it, so I'm going to pull it up. And the first thing we're going to do is, again, we have to bring in our printer profile. So to do that with Simplify 3D, I'm going to go to Help and down to Configuration Assistant. So we'll select that and then go down and click on this little arrow here. And the first thing you'll notice is it has a vast library of printer profiles. And this is sort of one of the huge advantages of going with Simplify 3D is if you have a 3D printer, that's the profile is probably you know, a good chance that it's in here already. So let's find our Creality CR-10, and here it is. So I'm just going to select it and then click next, and that's it. So click finish and it's already installed. So to choose my profile or to find it, I'm going to go over here where it says process, double click on it, and then you go to where it says select profile, and you see you can have all your different printers there. So I'm going to select my CR10, and that's how you would print to it. So let's now bring in our file and go through that same process. I'm going to go to import, select my Maker Faire robot here, and there it is on my build plate. So to tweak the settings, I'm going to double click process here. Similar thing as Cura, you can hide the advanced stuff here, and you've got your sort of quick print dialog box, right? You can select your material, fast, medium, or high quality, infill percentage. You can drag this slider, you know, up or down, and you know, click whether you want raft or do you want to generate supports. And that'll get you started. It'll get you going. Once you're ready to experiment with some more settings, you can go to show advanced, and here you've got lots and lots of settings to play with. So we can see some extrusion options here for our extruder. layer, we can select our layer height, how many top and bottom solid layers. So I'm going to keep it the same, 0.2 millimeter layer height. Additions, I have the option of using, the same thing here, grabbing my skirt or brim. In this case, we see very similar options. How many skirt outlines? I'm going to select 2, just like I did with Cura. Skirt layers is going to be 1, and you get to choose how far you want that outline away from your model. 4 millimeters sounds good here. So that's how you do a skirt in Simplify 3D. Next, we'll go to temperature, and I have the option for my heat bed temperature. That's at 60 degrees. If I wanted to change it, I just double click and type in a new number. My extruder, so notice here it's at 210. So let's do the same thing where I put 2 different set points, one for my initial layer and then the other temperature for my remaining layers. So to do that, I'm just going to go to add set point, and I'm going to go layer 1. I'm going to make, so that's already at 210, but I can make that whatever I want. So let's make it back to 210, and then my layer 2, I'll type, double click and choose layer 2. It's going to go to 200 for my temperature. So, and it's going to stay at whatever that final layer is. So layer 1, 210, layer 2, it drops to 200, and the remaining layers, it'll stay at 200. So that's really all I did. I mean, there's lots of other stuff here that we can go through, but I just want to kind of keep this simple right now. Again, the comments I got about my prints looking so great, this is all I did. Chose my layer height, my temperature, and I think really the key besides your settings is just getting that bed leveling right. That first layer adhesion is really your most important thing. So you want to make sure, use that sheet of paper to get that layer height to be perfect. Just the right distance, and you've got that first layer working 90%, I'd say like 98% of the time the rest of your print is going to be okay. So I'm going to click OK here for my settings, and then go to prepare to print down here. And a nice other feature about Simplify 3D is the simulation. I mean, I think this is almost worth it in itself. I can just take this arrow and just drag this layer up, and just really nice simulation here to show me my print. And so I can see it layer by layer. This saves you so much time, because I don't know how many times I've caught a mistake here, within the simulation rather than waiting for my print to finish. So let's go ahead and throw this on the printer as well, and then we'll compare the 2 prints between Cura as a slicer and between using Simplify 3D. I've got Simplify 3D on the left and Cura on the right. Both did an excellent job with this model. If you see any difference, let me know, but honestly, with this particular model, I'd be happy going with either slicer. Alright, if you have any questions on my setup or slicer settings, just leave it on the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, give me that thumbs up and subscribe for more videos. And if you're looking to learn how to design for 3D printing, check out my website at desktopmakes.com.